No change means nothing was learned. That is going to be the first thing that you learn today in this episode, which is titled Make Failure Useful. The biggest thing that I'm seeing out there today is that a lot of people don't have the best relationship with failure. We have failure and we have our identity. And that relationship between the two needs to be healed if you're going to be that person to get past making mistakes and failure. Because there's a lot of anxiety around failure. So we're going to go ahead and unpack that right here, right now. And I'm going to go ahead and break down the very first point. And this is the first point: good results lag behind new actions. So a lot of times when we have a failure or we make a mistake or we have an error, what tends to happen more often than not is not necessarily the error itself, but the interpretation of the error. And a lot of times you may not get the result. So in other words, you don't get the result, but you look at it as a problem or a bummer or an issue. And what needs to be understood is that a lot of good results lag behind new actions. So if you didn't get the results in the first shot, the next action has the ability and capability to give you new results. And that's where persistence comes in. So interpretation and persistence will move you forward. Let's go on to the next one. The next key point is knowing what's wrong isn't a change. So just because you figured out what's wrong doesn't mean that a change has actually occurred. It's important for you to evaluate what's wrong and ask yourself, what can we do to repair it so we can move forward? Next key point is feeling sad about the error won't fix things. And that's what happens is we have a mistake, we make an issue, we cause a problem, something happens, and we get caught up in our emotions. We're not looking at it logically, we're looking at it emotionally. So we start to feel sad about the error. And that error is repairable, but feeling sad about it is not going to fix things. And that's another key point that's going to help your relationship with failure. Next key point is you need to adapt in order to survive. And when we are making a mistake, that repair, that change, that adjustment, that's all part of adaptability. In order for us to survive and move forward in this world, we have to learn emotional resilience and adaptability. And this is where you need to learn to adapt. I'm an outdoors person. I love to go camping. Nothing goes right in the wild. Nothing goes right out in the forest. You have to adapt to everything that goes down. And that's all part of nature. Nature even adapts, and we are part of nature, so we have to learn to adapt too. And the next key point is true skill is by doing it 100 times over. A lot of us are either in the future or the past. And if you are trying to practice something, having your mind in the future can prevent you from doing your task right here and now. Having your mind in the past can stop you from doing your task right now. You have to be in the process. And being in the process is understanding that, okay, I'm just going to do it over and over again. And a lot of people don't like repetition because they find it to be boring, it's not sexy, whatever the case may be. But true skill is by doing it in the moment 100 times over. Mistakes cost time and energy, but it's about fixing the behavior. So what tends to happen is we focus on the mistake itself, the fact that the mistake actually happened, but we rarely focus on what behavior caused it, like what actually caused it. So when we look at the cause, because there's a cause and an effect, the mistake is the effect, but we have the cause to it. We can look at our own behavior. We don't blame the behavior. We simply ask ourselves, what can I fix in my behavior? Was I doing something incorrectly? How could I repair that? What can I do? Start asking questions, functional questions that allow you to not question your self-esteem and ability, but question where something can be repaired and what can you do differently. It's all about building the right questions to get through your failure. If you keep repeating your failures and build bad habits, then what happens is it's more about your behavior. It's not the mistake itself anymore. But we have to look at our behavior, but we have to separate that behavior to the best of our ability from our identity. And that's where we have to become emotionally resilient. So when we keep repeating the failures and build bad habits, your brain learns what you repeat. You become what you repeat. You become what you absorb. And if you've made an error, you need to analyze logically what that error was and say, where in my behavior do I need to change that? Receiving feedback is hard for a lot of people because when they receive feedback, they attach it to their identity. And then every bit of feedback feels like an attack and it feels like a threat on who they are. And that's when you know, by the way, that you have a unhealthy relationship with mistakes. Is for that reason that feedback requires you to change. And when you are building habits, and when you adjust your habits, the whole reason of adjusting those habits is for a newly learned repetition. So you make a change to your behavior, that's a newly learned repetition, which allows you to overcome those actual mistakes. So feedback is valuable, but we get caught up in the ego of, oh, damn, I screwed up. Oh, I can't believe I fucked up. And we get all hard on ourselves, not realizing that feedback is trying to tell you that you have to make an adjustment here. You have to change. That feedback requires your change. Be able to measure and track, and this is why smartwatches were invented. They work off of that logic of a systems thinker. Being a systems thinker, you just have a device to actually do it for you. Is that if you're working out and you want to make an adjustment to the workout, you have the ability to use the information there. So you can measure. A smartwatch is a measuring device, and it allows you to measure and track. And you yourself have to be the same way. When you make an error of any type, you want to get out of your emotions, get into that grounded place, and measure and track without emotionally beating yourself up. Measure and tracking will stop you. It stops faking the progress, because we feel like, oh, I'll just do it again. And here's the deal. When you measure and track stuff, the whole point of that is to provide you with evidence and information that you can interpret wisely, and then you get to do a newly learned pattern. You're like, all right, if I just make this change, I'm going to go down a different road, a different pattern, but with the new information. So you have to take that information that's acquired from measuring and tracking, however you do it, and apply it to what you wish to change. And that's where the value is. Actions can be checked. What does that mean? Well, our self-talk and our thoughts in our head will throw us back into the emotional place. It'll start to say things like, oh, you're no good. Why bother? Just give up now. And all of that self-talk comes in. And speaking out loud has a lot of power. When you have negative thoughts, whenever you speak out loud, that helps you override those negative self-talk because you're using a different part of your brain. So just keep that in mind. But only actions can be checked. The thoughts themselves can throw you into emotion, and if it throws you into that, it can just drag you backwards, right? But when we look at actions, those actions are there, and we are able to measure them and track them. And actions are relative to behaviors because they're repeated. They're happening over and over again. So you want to be able to measure and track, and guess what? Those actions become very trackable. When we're dealing with our thinking, the only way that you could actually track your thoughts is by journaling. If you're negative every single week, you have to be able to write down the date and time you actually had a thought. Start to track that, and what that does is it makes you become more self-aware. Can be valuable is I'm going to give you some examples in life of how you could take that error, take that mistake, and make some course corrections to the behavior and go in a different place. So this example is the fighter loses a match. Could be MMA, could be boxing. He loses a match. He figures out through the fight tape or video that he failed to keep his hands up. So he could emotionally beat himself down for 6 weeks, or he could recognize and train. And that's what happens. He figures out where he went wrong and changes the behavior to keep his guard up. And that is one solid example. Let's go on to the next one. Example would be a content creator. A content creator has low views on his video. He's frustrated, he's pissed. He gets into the self-talk of, I don't know if this channel is ever going to take off. I don't know if I'm going to get better. And he starts to beat himself up. If he beats himself up, or he or she beats themselves up at this point, then they don't get to move forward. And once you figure out why you have low views, and that's where you have to track the data on your channel, you can make new catchy hooks. You could experiment, make new catchy hooks, and then of course views actually increase. Let's go on to the next one. This has to do with business. Now, with business, the stakes go up because you're dealing with money. However, there's tons of business folks out there that have actually failed. They've failed repeatedly, but there's something called go-to-market, where you learn how to make your product go to the market. Now, in this case, if a business launch completely fails, it fails miserably, what they can do is take a look at the data, look at what happened, try to do your best to discover what went down, get the pre-orders first for the next time. Your next step is, okay, we're just going to get pre-orders first, and then the next launch actually succeeds as a result. So you see, a person could have solved it on the first shot. They could have spoken to a GTM, a go-to-market person. They could have learned before they did it. However, sometimes you have to find out. You have to take a chance. You have to have some kind of risk. It's all about mitigating of risk. So you get the pre-orders first and the next launch succeeds. Let's go on to the next one. This one is with school. You have a student, they get bad grades. They might do some flashcards, practice questions with a timer and spend a half hour at a time, half-hour intervals or 15-minute. Sometimes doing the short breaks, 15 minutes, and then another break of 15 minutes. They practice the questions with a timer, and then their score improves. So you got to understand that the failure provides you with data, provides you with information. It provides you with a stepping stone to move you forward. And if you don't see it that way, if you connect it to your identity, you are emotionally hurting yourself and your self-esteem. There's relationships, repeated bad relationships. What happens? They learn from boundaries. They have the boundaries. They learn boundaries from the bad experiences. So they've gotten in relationship. They've had a ton of bad experiences, but they failed. The biggest failure when we make a mistake, here's the biggest failure. The biggest failure when we make a mistake is not realizing what we can do and not realizing our own emotional resilience. That's where the biggest mistake of them all. That's where it weighs very heavy. That's where we have to learn as people. So you learn boundaries because you've had bad experiences, bad relationships. So what you do is you add boundaries and you actually stand by them. Speaking, I've done a lot of public speaking engagements myself. I enjoy it, and you learn a whole lot. You learn that not every crowd's the same. So you have a public speaking, you speak publicly, it bombs. You bomb the speech. So what you do is you have feedback. You get feedback from people, bad or good, and you learn a new speech style and timing. You decide to say, I'm going to change it up. I'm going to experiment. I'm going to adjust, and you're going to go from there. You do another speech, and you have success. It goes towards health. You have a health scare. You realize, I have bad eating, bad health behaviors. All of a sudden, from there, you start the gym, you eat good food, you measure and track, and then finally, your body checks out and the tests improve. So you can see where this is going. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my next videos. Have a great day. Take care. This is the Voices of Victory, and I'm Mario Leone. Take care.